Hello, welcome to another episode of Take From It What You Will, where we discuss the issues of the day objectively using primary source documents and information to form our judgments. Boy, a lot to cover. I haven't done one of these in a few weeks. A lot to cover. What's been happening? Let's work backwards. We've had the recent police shootings, both involving blacks who have been stopped and would appear to be excessive use of force in detaining them and ending up in there being shot and killed. I say appearances. We have to wait until all of the results are in of the test. Where all we have seen are some videos that are clips, so it would be interesting to see. But certainly would appear that there are some issues there, and we'll cover that though in a minute. I don't want to prejudge anything on that. And then the shootings of the police officers in Dallas. All of this again points to a dissatisfaction and even a fear about where the country is going, and I think it does reflect poorly on the leadership that we're seeing from not just from the executive office, but on a whole of our federal government. The way the leadership is handling all these issues, they're completely at odds with each other. Nothing can get done, even in dire situations such as we're seeing now. But we'll touch on that a little bit more. Our hearts go out to all of those, not only the most recent 7 who have died at the hands of violence, but all people who suffer from such affliction is the only thing you can call it. But let's move on back then and look at prior to that. We had the big news was FBI Director Comey and his decision not to prosecute, or not to recommend prosecution. It's not his job to prosecute, but not to recommend prosecution of Hillary Clinton on the email issue, her having her private email server for her public duties. And I believe if you look back through the chronicles of Take From It What You Will, you'll see that I had said that this would never happen anyway, and you knew that was not going to happen. And I think Director Comey is an absolutely honorable person. I just think there was just no way that he could see recommending moving forward under the current circumstances and having there be a successful litigation. And I would agree wholeheartedly, and I think I said that actually several months ago. That being said, I think what he certainly handed a lot of ammunition to the anti-Hillary Clinton crowd to fight her candidacy for the upcoming elections. Yes, you can say she's not going to be indicted, not going to be prosecuted, perhaps. But as far as her candidacy goes, let's see, what does that do to her resume? A lot of her resume was foreign affairs experience. Well, Director Comey did come out and say there would be, in most cases, a person still working with the government would be chastised, would come under some sort of restrictions or punishment, from reprimand all the way through to dismissal. Certainly a loss of their security clearances if that person were in the government. So it makes it tough. I mean, the question then is, well, I would have asked if I were in Congress, and you're asking, well, if if you had this person, would you hire them again? If you had fired that person, or if you saw a person who had this history, would you hire them for the FBI again if they applied for the job? I believe he would have answered no. And the other thing is, what would you think of somebody putting that on, using you as a reference, i.e. putting that on their resume, that was part of their job, their work history, for future consideration of future employers? And I think that would have been a resounding zero no as well. That would not be a good reference. So her using the time at the State Department as Secretary of State as a selling point for her candidacy, i.e. putting it on her resume as why she should be president, just kind of is blown out the window in that case, in my opinion. So anyway, that's all over. We'll see how it pans out. I think looking at the other side, you see Donald Trump, and I wonder about the Trump party, the Republicans. The Republicans are so set in their ways. They're so stuck in the mud in many ways that it's difficult for them to slog along. I think a lot of the problem is they just can't keep up. And I'm not saying they can't keep up with Trump. They can't keep up with anything. They appear to be so mired in Republican thought, in just the Republican demeanor, the Republican mindset, that they can't think outside the box. They just can't. So when someone like Donald Trump comes along, who's a loose cannon, there's just no way of categorizing him and putting him into a box and making him a Republican. Now, he's going to run as a Republican candidate. Whether he can bring the Republicans on board in mass and become elected is another thing. I think he's actually got a good shot of it, and there are several respected analytical people, not from either side of the party, that do think he has a very good shot of getting elected, depending on what Hillary Clinton does. And that's, again, I think both of these candidates boil down to a real issue that America has with the electoral system, the way it stands right now, and that is essentially a two-party system. Although anybody can be a candidate for presidency if you fit all of the characteristics, but with the campaigning that goes on for literally almost 2 years, the billions that are required, or hundreds of millions anyway, to be able to put through a campaign, just highlight, in a year like this, highlight the weaknesses in that kind of a system, and there has to be some reform. It has to come about. It literally will be the downfall of the United States if we cannot reform the electoral system, because there are some bad people out there with a lot of money, or access to a lot of money, and they're going to get in power. And there may be a couple of them in the offing right now. You never know. You don't know what's behind. My personal opinion, Donald Trump this is a personal opinion. I haven't made a decision yet on who I might vote, who I will vote for. Donald Trump concerns me just because I feel he's not the kind of person who will stick with a job. It'll be something he'll get bored with, and he'll move on to something else. He would also, obviously, I don't worry about the loose cannon and saying things. He can say all the rhetoric he wants, but there are a lot of things he cannot do as president that people think he can do that could occur. And the main thing is who would the cabinet be? The concerns I have about Hillary Clinton are I do believe she is a very bright, sharp person, but I still think that everything would be about what does this mean for Hillary, and she would be we would be back to a Nixon White House. We would be probably going through the same things that we went through in the Nixon era. Distrust of anyone outside of her small little coterie of people. And I don't think she would change. I don't think she would change her ways. I think she would still try to isolate herself and keep her communications private. I don't think she would change anything that she's doing that she had done as Secretary of State. I really don't. The other thing, the caveat, or not a caveat, I think an addendum, I should say, to this is you see Congress speaking a lot about what she did and what happened. I hope somebody is going to people like Secretary of State Kerry and ensuring that he's not doing the same things that she was doing. I doubt it. I would like to see something like that, though. That would also probably put an extra nail in a Clinton coffin. But if Secretary of State Kerry is immediately when he took over suspended that type of activity within the State Department, would be an interesting topic to investigate. I think the other thing that's happening now, and this gets back to some of the things I talked about before, is that I still don't think that President Obama is going to easily relinquish control of the government. I don't mean to be an alarmist in that or an extremist but I just see things. I mean, and he may have a lot of support in that. I mean, look, you have a president who is more popular now than ever, and you have two people who are extremely unpopular, who seem to compete with each other as to how unpopular can they be competing for the presidency. And because there's no one out, Gary Johnson. But Gary Johnson, again, people voting for Gary Johnson, he may very well get a poll very highly. But again, it's a vote against people. I'm voting against this person. I'm voting against these two people. That's the vote for Gary Johnson or Jill Stein, the Green Party. Either one of these votes are going to be votes against people, and they're not, obviously can't. It's just impossible to think that they would get enough votes to even become elected. So all sorts of weird things can happen with this election, things getting thrown into the House of Representatives. There could be accusations of voter fraud. Look at what's happening overseas. You've got now, and I warned about this over a year ago. You've got China. We're taking our eyes off the ball. China and Russia are making deals. I'm sorry. Yes, you've got Putin saying that U.S. is the only superpower in the world. Well, he doesn't believe that any more than anyone in China does. China and Russia are looking at putting together a combined superpower, a pact together, and believe me, China combined with Russia are going to become the new superpower. And all we have to do is continue taking our eye off the ball, and we're going to see that come to fruition. Now, the other thing I want to get back to is, of course, there's Brexit that occurred, and you see, this is just the initiation of what I talked about, nationalism before. Again, nationalism in Europe, nationalist sentiment taking over Europe, closing of borders, economic issues with the euro because of the weakness of the ECB. I think what you're going to see, either Europe is going to have to become a single state, and Germany would probably enjoy leadership in such a state, or they're going to pull apart. And again, Germany will be the solid state that comes out of that. And you think about, well, then what's going to happen with the issues coming out of Southeastern Europe, where if you look back, World War I, World War II, where did everything begin? All of this happened in Eastern, Southeastern Europe. All of the wars always start there. Now, there may be issues. I don't presume to think that war again would erupt in Europe. But who's the large evil entity going to be? It's I'm sorry, you turn around and look at yourself. It's going to be the United States. So is there, and this just pops into my head now and then, is there an opportunity here where we see a union between Russia, China, Middle East, Arab powers? Because there's a lot of common culture in there, even if it's not a religious, it's a cultural commonality. And don't get confused with religion and culture. There's a lot of cultural similarities between these people. And that unified group eventually becoming the power, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a military takeover, but certainly economically, that powerhouse would rule the world. Would the U.S. stand alone? Would the U.S. be the isolated island of what we think of as freedom, or is there a new world order coming about? I think there's a new world order coming about, and I think what you're going to see is Russia, China, Middle East coming together in a relationship, and of course the Koreas, Northern Africa will come into this in some ways, and that is going to be the new world power before very long. Well, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but this, think of decades. It still could happen in my lifetime, certainly in my kids' lifetime. That I'm afraid you're going to see, and you're going to see U.S. power diminishing. Now, to combat that, if you could get a combined Western Europe, U.S., North America that could look beyond the issues that we're having, and form an alliance, a strong alliance. Of course, we have NATO. We have a strong alliance. There's crap about Brexit means that England's leaving NATO. It's just hogwash. The whole thing about Brexit causing an economic collapse. Hogwash. You knew that was hogwash. The UK is super strong. The markets are super resilient because they're international trading. They're not just based on one country. And of course, there's impact to currencies, etc. But that was coming. Brexit isn't causing that. Brexit is a result of it. Brexit is a result of the weakening of the euro and the problems that Europe has, and the ECB being unable to control their economy. So anyway, it's going to be an interesting couple of decades. It's going to be an interesting next few months as we see this election coming. But again, I'll get back to, I think, with the potential for issues, the U.S. has taken its eye off the ball because of the election time period. All the internal strife, unfortunately, the current administration has heightened strife. But I think what's going to happen is you're going to see even the potential for more attacks, either terrorist attacks or attacks similar to Dallas in the coming months. And look for some real heightened tensions as we approach election time, and President Obama potentially taking some actions that could delay elections, could preclude elections, or look at things like a Trump victory or even a Clinton victory, but more likely if it were a Trump victory, there being calls of voter fraud, especially if the election's very, very close, counts, no elections thrown into the House of Representatives, all sorts of mayhem going on, but I think the upshot of most of that is Barack Obama is going to stay in power. In one way or another, he's going to be the leading hand. That's what he wants anyway. And a lot of people would like to see that. Anyway, that covers about 20 minutes, which is about as long as I want to keep these things. So I hope you enjoyed this. Listen to it. I would love to have feedback. Take from it what you will.